Elisa Lam stepped off the Greyhound bus and into the stifling Los Angeles heat. Her backpack felt heavy on her shoulders. The Cecil Hotel loomed before her, a towering presence casting a long shadow over the sidewalk. It wasn't the charming boutique hotel she had envisioned. The Cecil was a monolith of faded grandeur, its facade stained with grime and neglect.
A shiver ran down Elisa's spine. She pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped inside. The air within was stale and thick with the scent of disinfectant, barely masking an underlying odor of decay. The lobby was dimly lit, the ornate chandeliers caked with dust. A sense of unease settled over Elisa. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself it was just the fatigue from her long journey.
"Hi, I have a reservation,"
she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man behind the counter barely looked up. He pushed a registration form towards her, his gaze cold and unsettling.
"Enjoy your stay,"
he mumbled, his words devoid of warmth. Elisa took the key, the metal cold and heavy in her hand. It felt less like a key and more like a warning. The elevator groaned as it carried Elisa upwards. The interior was scratched and dented, lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb that cast long, distorted shadows. Elisa felt a strange sense of disorientation, as if she were traveling not just through space, but through time itself. She stepped out onto her floor. The hallway was deserted, shrouded in an eerie silence. The only light came from a single bare bulb at the far end, casting long, menacing shadows that danced along the walls. The air was thick with the smell of dust and mildew, making her throat tighten.
She found her room. It was small and sparsely furnished, with a single window overlooking an air shaft. The wallpaper was peeling at the seams, revealing patches of discolored plaster beneath. The bed was neatly made, but the sheets felt damp and clammy. She dropped her backpack on the floor and walked over to the window. The air shaft was a narrow chasm, barely wide enough for a bird to fly through. She could hear the muffled sounds of the city below, but they seemed distant and distorted, as if coming from another world.
Turning away from the window, Elisa noticed a small inscription scratched into the wall beside the door. It was faint and barely visible, but as she leaned closer, she made out a single chilling word: help. Sleep did not come easily to Elisa that night. She lay in bed, her senses on high alert. The silence of the room was unnerving, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling around her. She could have sworn she heard whispers coming from the walls, faint murmurs that seemed to ebb and flow with the rhythm of her own pulse. Every time she closed her eyes, she was plagued by unsettling images, shadowy figures lurking at the edge of her vision, disembodied voices calling her name. She tossed and turned, the damp sheets clinging to her skin like a shroud.
At one point, she woke with a start, convinced that someone was standing at the foot of her bed, watching her. She sat up, her heart pounding in her chest, but the room was empty. The only sound was the incessant dripping of a leaky faucet in the bathroom.
As the first rays of dawn pierced through the grime-covered window, Elisa finally drifted off to sleep. But even in her dreams, she couldn't escape the oppressive atmosphere of the Cecil Hotel. She dreamt of dark hallways and shadowy figures, of whispers that sent chills down her spine. When she finally woke, the sun was high in the sky. She felt exhausted, as if she hadn't slept at all. She knew then, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was not alone in the Cecil Hotel. Seeking a distraction from the unsettling atmosphere of her room, Elisa decided to explore the hotel. She had heard whispers from other guests about a strange game they played in the elevator, a game rumored to open a portal to another dimension. Intrigued and more than a little afraid, Elisa followed the instructions she had overheard. She rode the elevator alone, stopping at specific floors in a precise sequence, her heart pounding with each button press.
As she reached the final floor, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. The elevator doors opened onto a dimly lit hallway. It looked identical to her own floor, yet something felt different, off. A coldness emanated from the very walls, seeping into her bones. Elisa hesitated, suddenly unsure if she wanted to continue.
But it was too late. A figure emerged from the shadows at the end of the hall. A woman, dressed in a long white gown, her face obscured by darkness. She glided towards Elisa, her movements strangely fluid, almost inhuman. Panic surged within Elisa. She stumbled back, fumbling for the elevator button. As the doors slid closed, the last thing she saw was the woman's face, illuminated for a fleeting moment by the elevator light. It was a face frozen in a silent scream, a mask of pure terror. The encounter in the elevator left Elisa shaken to her core. She retreated to her room, the image of the woman's face seared into her mind. Fear gnawed at her, whispering that she had gone too far, that she had disturbed something ancient and evil.
I have to believe it was just a prank. A cruel joke played by the other hotel guests.
But deep down, she knew the truth. The elevator game was real, and it had opened a door to something sinister. Elisa found herself increasingly drawn to the hotel's dark corners, as if compelled by an unseen force. She wandered the hallways at odd hours, her gaze drawn to the peeling paint and the strange symbols etched into the walls. Symbols that seemed to writhe and shift before her eyes.
What do these symbols mean? Why do they keep changing?
In her room, she began to find strange messages scrawled on the mirror, written in a language she couldn't understand. The handwriting was erratic and frantic, filled with a desperate energy that sent chills down her spine. One message written in shaky English stood out from the rest. They are watching. They are always watching.
Who is watching? What do they want from me?
As the days turned into nights, Elisa's behavior became increasingly erratic. She suffered from bouts of insomnia, pacing her room for hours on end, her mind racing with paranoia. She spoke to herself in hushed whispers, her words disjointed and nonsensical.
No, I can't let them find me. They're everywhere. Everywhere.
She stopped answering calls from her family and friends, her once bright personality now shrouded in a cloud of fear and suspicion. She saw shadows lurking in every corner, heard voices whispering her name in the dead of night. The hotel staff noticed her strange behavior, but they seemed more annoyed than concerned. They had seen it all before. The Cecil had a long history of attracting lost and troubled souls. Elisa Lam was just the latest in a long line of guests who had succumbed to its darkness.
Why won't they leave me alone? Why won't they just go away?
One evening, a maid knocked on Elisa's door, intending to clean the room. There was no answer. She tried the handle, but the door was locked. She could hear faint noises coming from inside, a low murmur punctuated by the sound of someone pacing back and forth. Uneasy, the maid decided to inform the manager. As she turned to leave, she thought she heard a blood-curdling scream coming from within the room. But when she knocked again, there was only silence.
Whispering, "Please, someone help me." Elisa felt lost, adrift in a sea of shadows and whispers. Her mind, once sharp and clear, was now a labyrinth of fear and paranoia. The boundaries between reality and delusion blurred, the line between sanity and madness growing thin. She wandered the hallways of the Cecil, her bare feet padding silently on the worn carpets. The air hung heavy with the weight of unseen eyes, the silence broken only by the echo of her own footsteps. She sought refuge in the hotel's rooftop, drawn to the open sky like a moth to a flame. The city stretched out before her, a glittering expanse of lights and shadows, but even here, high above the bustling streets, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. One night, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain, I found myself drawn to the hotel's water tanks. They loomed above me, massive metal cylinders casting long, eerie shadows across the rooftop. A strange sense of peace washed over me, as if the answer to all my fears, the key to escaping the nightmare that had ensnared me, lay within those tanks. Driven by this newfound clarity, I began to climb.
The metal ladder was cold and slick against Elisa's bare hands. She climbed higher, the wind whipping through her hair, the city lights blurring below. Reaching the top of the tank, she pushed open the heavy hatch and peered inside. The interior of the tank was dark and cavernous, the air thick with the metallic scent of stagnant water. But it was more than just the darkness that made Elisa's blood run cold. It was the feeling of wrongness, of an ancient evil that permeated the very air she breathed.
I felt a presence behind me, cold and menacing. Turning slowly, I came face to face with the woman from the elevator. She stood at the edge of the rooftop, her white gown billowing in the wind, her face a mask of pure malevolence. Terror lent me strength. I stumbled back, my foot slipping on the wet metal. I cried out, my voice swallowed by the wind as I plunged into the darkness. The last thing I saw before the icy water closed over my head was the woman's face, contorted in a triumphant grin.
Days turned into weeks, and Elisa Lam vanished without a trace. Her disappearance made headlines, her face plastered on missing person posters across the city. The police investigated, but the Cecil Hotel seemed to guard its secrets closely. Guests complained of low water pressure and a strange taste coming from their taps. Some reported hearing strange noises coming from the roof, like the muffled cries of a woman in distress. But their concerns were dismissed by the overworked staff, who had grown accustomed to the hotel's unsettling atmosphere.
Then, one morning, a maintenance worker made a gruesome discovery. Floating face down in one of the rooftop water tanks was the body of Elisa Lam. Her clothes were ripped and torn, her body covered in strange markings that defied explanation. The news of Elisa's death sent shockwaves through the city. The police ruled her death an accidental drowning, but many questioned how she could have gotten onto the roof, let alone into the locked water tank.
Security footage from the hotel's elevator surfaced, showing Elisa's final moments. In the video, she can be seen acting erratically, pressing multiple buttons, hiding in the corner, and talking to someone who wasn't there. The footage was chilling, inexplicable. Elisa Lam's death remains a mystery to this day. Some believe she was the victim of foul play, while others whisper of a darker force at work. The Cecil Hotel, already steeped in a history of violence and tragedy, became synonymous with her tragic end. The hotel has since been renovated, rebranded in an attempt to escape its sinister past. But the stories persist. Guests still report strange occurrences, flickering lights, disembodied whispers, the feeling of being watched. Some claim to have seen Elisa's ghost wandering the hallways, her eyes wide with terror, forever searching for a way out of the nightmare that claimed her. The Cecil Hotel stands as a chilling reminder that some places are forever marked by darkness, haunted by the echoes of tragedies past. And in the heart of the City of Angels, where dreams collide with despair, the line between reality and nightmare can blur, sometimes with fatal consequences. The story of Elisa Lam serves as a chilling reminder that some mysteries may never be solved, and some places may forever remain shrouded in darkness.